Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, my Lord.
Mackintosh.
We have Mr. Redmond this afternoon.
Mr. Redmond. Good afternoon, Mr. Redmond.
Good afternoon.
As you understand, you're about to be asked questions by Mr. Mackintosh, who's sitting opposite. But before that, I understand you're prepared to affirm.
Yes.
Right. Could I ask you, sitting where you are, to repeat these words after me? I solemnly, sincerely, and truly
I solemnly, sincerely, and truly
declare and affirm
declare and affirm
that I will tell the truth,
that I will tell the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the
and
truth.
nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much, Mr. Redmond. Now, we've scheduled the afternoon for your evidence. I don't know whether we'll require all of our time between now and 4 or a little after 4. But if at any stage you want to take a break, just give me an indication and we can take a break. Could I encourage you to maybe speak rather more loudly than you would in normal conversation, and possibly a little more slowly? I and others in the room will be trying to note what you have to say. Now, Mr. Mackintosh.
Thank you, my Lord. Mr. Redmond, if I can take your full name.
John Redmond.
And are you retired at the moment?
Yes, I am.
Yes. So did you produce a statement as part of your preparation for this inquiry?
Yes, I have. I've got some notes that I've
But you
prepared.
produced a statement as well?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, it's not a statement, it's really notes.
No. Before you came here, were you sent a questionnaire?
Oh, a questionnaire, yes.
Are you willing to adopt those questions and answers as part of your evidence to the inquiry?
Yes.
Yes. Well, Lord, I should say we also have a corporate statement from Capita Property and Infrastructure Limited, which can be found in the volume 3 for this week at page 498 of the statement bundle. There's no need to go to it. Now, Mr. Redmond, you mentioned you brought some stuff with you. Can I ask you, without...
Sorry, my fault. I thought I had remembered your reference to the corporate statement. Could you just give me the reference again?
Volume 3 of the statement bundles for this hearing, page 498, my Lord.
Right, and the bundle number?
Volume 3 of the hearing bundles.
Right, okay.
It's statement 16.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. Redmond, you explained that you have some notes to your right.
Yes.
When did you construct these notes?
When did I?
When did you prepare these notes?
Over the last few days.
Right. I'm going to ask you not to look at them at the moment. If, when I ask you a question, you consider there's something in there that would enable you to answer the question, tell me, and we'll work out what to do at that point.
Okay.
But of course, the call participants haven't had access to the documents that you have in that pile, so I don't want to just go to them without thinking about it carefully. Could I ask you to explain your role as a Capita employee in the new South Glasgow Hospital project?
My role was as NEC 3 supervisor.
And when did that start?
June 2010.
And when did it end?
Well, I retired in December 2015.
So you weren't involved after that date?
No.
No. And how did you find out you'd be doing this job?
How did I?
Find out that you'd be doing this job? Was it allocated to you? Did you apply for it?
It was allocated.
And have you been a NEC 3 supervisor on other jobs?
No.
What other roles had you performed for Capita?
I was the independent tester at the Birmingham Hospital, Queen Elizabeth in Birmingham.
Independent tester?
Tester, yeah.
Before you started this job, had you any training about the role of an NEC 3 supervisor?
Yes, I had a 2-day training session.
Right.
In Birmingham.
So could you perhaps explain to the inquiry what you understand is the purpose and role of an NEC 3 supervisor in an NEC 3 design and build contract?
Yeah, it's to carry out quality inspections to make sure that the work is done in accordance with the employer's requirements, and to present reports to the employer and identify defects that may arise and issue defect notifications to the contractor.
And how do you check that work is being done in conformity with the employer's requirements?
Through the specifications and the drawings.
So this would be both drawings and other documents.
Yeah.
What might be helpful, I think, is to try and understand what drawings and what documents you're looking at. So when did you start doing these inspections?
Started just, I think it was late 2010.
So what were you inspecting at that point?
Basically, it was internal fit out with partitions, and starting with partitions, I had a colleague who was doing the structural.
Would this have been in the laboratory block?
Well, yeah, the laboratory block had started around about June of 2010 when I went on site, and I was inspecting that. And also when the acute started later on, I was looking after that. I had 3 colleagues working with me. One was a structural engineer and 2 were mechanical and electrical engineers.
So your 3 colleagues, what was the name of the structural engineer?
His name was...
You can't remember his name?
No.
Can you remember the name of the mechanical electrical engineers?
Graham Bruce and Alan Follett, and the structural engineer was...
Alan
Follett. And
Follett, right.
And the structural engineer was Willie Roxburgh.
Willie Roxburgh, right. So if we go forward to the point when you were looking at the acute building, when was that? When did you start inspecting the acute building?
I think it was about late 2010. Round about, I'm not sure.
Do you think it could have been that early, the acute building?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
Right. But when you were inspecting the acute building, what material did you have to look at to compare what was being built to?
Initially, when the structure was being built, it was in concrete. So our structural engineer would be looking at that. And then the internal fit out with partitions, and then following that, the services.
But what material were you looking at? Were you looking at drawings?
Oh, yeah, looking at drawing specification for the work that was being carried out.
Right. So
yeah.
What were you looking at those on? Was it paper copies or a device?
No, there was a platform called Aconex, and all the drawings were uploaded onto Aconex from the various consultants.
And how did you access Aconex?
Digitally through the computer.
Did you have your own computer, or was it provided to you by Multiplex?
No, it was a Capita computer.
Right.
Sorry, it was
a Capita computer.
Right. Is it a handheld device, or do you go into an office and...
No, it's just a laptop.
It's a
laptop.
A laptop.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're out on site and you're looking at a piece of fitting, do you open up your device and look at the drawings?
No, I take a paper copy.
You take a paper copy?
Yeah.
So you print out the drawing,
yeah,
or whatever it is, from the Aconex system,
yeah,
and take that on site?
Yeah, there was a printing room on site. Yeah.
So if we can imagine you with your hard hat on site,
yeah,
looking at a particular aspect of the early construction of the acute hospital, you would have big paper drawings.
No, small paper drawings.
Small paper drawings.
A3.
A3.
But I carried out regular inspections with the Brookfield's project team. So I didn't go out on my own and then come back and then speak to them. I took the project supervisors out with me to look at the...
So you'd go as a group?
Absolutely.
Would you go with your engineering colleagues, or would they do their own work?
They do their own work.
Right.
And go out with the respective Brookfield project managers.
So let's...
Mr. Redmond, could I... It's very difficult.
Yeah.
Could I ask you to remember what I said about speed?
Yeah. I've had a sore throat, and...
we Scots tend to speak quite quickly. And it's sometimes just a bit difficult when you're trying to note. I'm not looking for dictation speed, but maybe a little slower than normal conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We can just imagine, so we can get this in our minds as an inquiry, that you are in the main part of the building, the tower, some years after it started, and you're looking at a particular ward, and it's been fitted out or partially fitted out internally. So it's not an exposed concrete shelf. So you'd have your A3 drawings, and you'd be accompanied by the multiplex supervisors. Yes?
Yep.
Yeah. Now, let's imagine that the thing that's going in at that moment is some of the ventilation ducting. So would you have drawings showing the size of the ducting?
Well, the M&E supervisor would have done that.
Yes. So he'd have drawings.
Yes.
And they would show the diameter, the width, the depth.
The ventilation and ducting, or pipes, came in modular form, so they were actually in sections.
So he'd know the size of the sections on the drawing.
They all came modular, delivered to site.
And then he can compare the drawings to the sections.
Yeah.
Yes. And would the drawings he had access to have the amount of air that was supposed to go through these pipes?
I can't answer that, I don't know.
You don't know. If we think about the air handling rooms, when your M&E colleague is inspecting the air handling room, they would have drawings of the air handling unit.
Yeah.
And
of the units, I'm not sure about that. The actual individual units?
Well, at some point, someone's got to check they're the right units, haven't they?
Yeah, yeah.
So who does that?
I think it would be the heating engineer.
Well, who in the Capita team checks that the right air handling units have been fitted into the plant rooms?
Yeah, I think it would be the heating engineer who would do that.
And that'd be doing that for you?
Well, doing it for Capita, yeah.
Well, were you the NEC 3 supervisor?
We're all NEC 3
You're
supervisors.
all NEC 3 supervisors. Okay, right. The question, so what part of the fit out are you personally checking?
I'm checking construction and build.
Of what?
Of the acute.
So, for example, would you ever check the aspect of construction and build that included any of the following items? Ducting?
Yes.
Air handling units?
No.
Vents?
Yes.
Pressure, particular types of doors designed to achieve pressure differentials?
No, I don't think so.
Doors, the fitting of the right sort
doors,
of door.
yeah, doors,
the door,
yeah.
right, okay. Where the vent is in the ceiling?
Yeah.
Right. So when you check all those things, what do the drawings you're looking at tell you?
Are you talking about completed, or you could talk about?
At any stage, if
at
you're
any
looking
stage.
at, say, let's imagine you go into a, we'll give you an example. Let's imagine you're checking the isolation rooms in the children's hematology ward, Ward 2A, the Shahadin unit. Do you remember that unit with the curved corridor?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And you're checking one of the isolation rooms. Does this remember this sort of rooms?
Yep.
They have a lobby
Yep.
and a bedroom
Yep.
and an ensuite. And you're checking that it's the right door, to keep it very simple. What would you be looking at when you check it's the right door?
I'd be looking at to see if the seal was properly formed around the door.
Yes.
To see that there was adequate space for the door to open.
And would you be checking that against a drawing?
Yes.
What drawings would those be?
There would be plan drawings showing the floor plans.
Would they be the construction drawings?
Yes.
Right. You explained to us earlier on that you considered it your role to check that what was built was compliant with the employer's requirements.
Yep.
Would you look at the employer's requirements, the document?
Not necessarily for checking doors, no.
But would you have read it?
In the past, yes.
Right.
And used it.
And used it. So if you and your colleagues are checking an isolation room, would you go and look at the section of the employer's requirements that specify the type of isolation room?
They look at the specification and the drawings in relation to that, yes.
I'm going to show you a document that I
Okay.
didn't put in your document list, but it might illustrate the problem.
Right.
If we could go, please, to bundle 46, volume 3, document 1. So it's on page 5. So have you seen this before?
I do recall seeing that before, yes.
Right. Now, allow me a moment just to make sure I've got the right page. Can we go, please, to page 177? I'm not expecting you to remember this document, but I think it raises an interesting question. So this page, which is page 177 of the bundle, page 172 of the employer's requirements, it is a section headed 8.2.14, ventilation of isolation rooms. Do you see how at 8.2.14.7, it lists some standards?
Yep.
And above it, it says, refer to draft SHPN 4 and drawings G1274M5702 and 03.
Yep.
How far do you go into this? So would you, for example, have had to read SHPN 4 and those drawings in order to do your job?
Me personally.
Or your colleagues?
They would know of that of those the SHTMs, yes. And throughout the project, we would reaffirm those with Brookfield. There was a few occasions where we had to remind them to use various SHTMs.
So how do you reaffirm an SHTM?
By reminding them that the design should be in line with those, because there's a point in the project where you can't really define whether they're building it to an SHTM. It's only when it's getting near the end when they're actually testing and balancing the system to determine the.
So you would have carried out tests and balance, or your colleagues would have carried out.
The commissioning engineer would do that.
Right. So I'm going to leave the commissioning engineer to one side and stay back about the building checks.
Yeah.
So if we again imagine that you or one of your M&E colleagues is checking that an isolation room in Ward 2A has been correctly built according to the employer's requirements, should we take that you would look at the construction drawings and, at the very least, this section as well?
I can't answer that because the engineer would look at that.
Right. In terms of your understanding of the role of an NEC3 supervisor, does it extend to more than simply checking that what was built is what's in the construction drawings?
The supervisor must have a knowledge of the various SHTMs.
No, that's not the question I asked.
Oh, sorry.
If we take this off the screen, if you or your engineering colleagues are checking that something has been built correctly, do they need to do more than simply look at the drawing and say, yep, it's the same as the drawing?
Not really, because the designer uses the SHTMs as a guide to develop their drawings.
How do you know?
Because they can't produce the drawings unless they refer to the SHTMs.
How do you know?
Well, the guidance notes for consultants.
But you've got a construction drawing.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know that the designer, whether it's the architect or the M&E engineer employed by Multiplex, has correctly applied a particular piece of guidance?
We don't necessarily know that until there's a point where you're testing the various. It could be an SHTM for ventilation, or it could be one for fire code. So you wouldn't really know until it got to a point where that was identified. And it's not as if you can see it at a point in time. you would have to wait until it got to a certain.
So let's take an example. We've had evidence that the ventilation engineering drawings that your colleagues would have looked at for a single room in the hospital, in the tower, or indeed in the Teenage Cancer Trust, would have had marked on them the amount of air a particular duct is supposed to send. In this case, 40 litres a second. And it would have said in a small number against the drawing, 40 litres a second. Is that something you're aware of?
I'm aware of the air change rates, yes.
No. Would you have seen, are you aware that drawings would have shown the designed air production of ducting?
Yeah.
Yes, right. How do the Capita NEC3 supervisors check that drawing is in compliance with relevant guidance?
Well, the designer has produced the drawings to the employer's design requirements.
But shouldn't you be checking that?
We're checking the drawings as the building is being constructed.
No, I don't mean that. Is that if it's your job, and I can go to a document that expands on this, as an NEC3 supervisor, including your colleagues, to check that what is built is in accordance with the employer's requirements. Yep. And one of the employer's requirements is that a particular piece of guidance is followed. Are you saying that you assume the designer has followed it?
Unless we see evidence to the contrary to that, by carrying out inspections and reviewing the drawings.
If, for example, are you aware of the debate that underlies this inquiry around what is the appropriate air change rate for a single bedroom in a hospital?
Yes.
Yes. Now, so I'll just put this to you as a sort of broad brush issue and then see what you know about it. So that we've had some evidence. Well, firstly, are you familiar with SHTM 0301?
Not off
the top of head. Okay, well, I'll do it at a high level. So we've had evidence that that particular SHTM specifies that single bedrooms, or indeed general wards, should provide 6 air changes an hour.
Yeah.
You're familiar with that as
Yes.
an issue, right? We've also had evidence that the drawings for the ventilation system that were being built would have shown that each room was being supplied with 40 litres a second. Have you come across that in your work?
No, but I think I saw reference to it in the bundles.
When you were working on site, did anyone mention 40 litres a second to you? No, right.
No.
Would you have ever had occasion to look at a room data sheet?
Yes.
Yes. So do the room data sheets say 40 litres a second?
I can't remember from memory.
So in order just to help this point be clearer to both you and me, I'm going to just see if I can put one up for you on the screen. Give me a moment to find it. Which would, of course, be the moment the internet decides to go slowly. So I think it's bundle 47. This bundle contains signatures, but we're not going to a page with signatures. Volume 3. And I think it's page 38. No, it's not. It's here we are. It's page 392. So I'll just walk through this, then ask you a question about the generality, not this particular room. So this is the front page of a room data sheet from room NCH02 TCT03, and this is the version from 2011. On the next page, the environmental page, just zoom out, please. We have another drawing. This is again earlier in the design process. And then the next page is where they start, the one after that, at 395, they start listing items of equipment.
Yeah.
So to what extent would you use documents like this to do your work?
Especially the list of schedule of components.
So you'd be
From my
checking
point
they
of
were
view.
there.
Yeah.
Right. If we go back to page 393, would you personally use this page of a room data sheet for any purpose in your work?
No.
No. Would your M&E colleagues use this page?
Yes.
Yes. Do you see how on the ventilation row, there's no figure for extract air and no spite? Is that something you've come across before?
Not really, no.
No. So I know you haven't used this, but there's a question that arises from this. Do you see how mechanical ventilation notes? It says supply air rate at 40 litres per second. Now, during your work on site, did you ever come across the idea that air would be supplied at 40 litres a second?
No.
No. Well, we'll take that off the screen. So this is a rather complicated concept. The question I'm going to put to you. So it has a few stages. So we discussed a few moments ago how the engineering drawings, we are told, had 40 litres a second written on them. You're nodding. And there's a person writing a transcript and they can't see the nodding. So if you agree with me, say yes. If you disagree with me, say no. We have room data sheets that your M&E colleagues would have looked at that have 40 litres a second.
Okay.
And we have an SHTM 0301 2009 draft, which was incorporated into the contract, which says 6 air changes an hour. Now, was that something you were aware of?
Only looking through the bundles.
So there's three.
Sorry, I didn't catch.
Sorry, only by looking through the bundles I was aware of that.
Okay. But
So we have,
not at the time.
Not that. We have 3 fact points. I'm asking this question because you're here and you're one of the only capital witnesses that we'll be able to get.
Okay.
Now, how do you and your colleagues, and particularly your M&E colleagues, work out whether the air supply to that room is in accordance with the contract and the employer's requirements? How do you work that out?
It would be from the drawings.
From the drawings?
Yeah,
you wouldn't look behind them? Because there's
not necessarily, no, because I can give you an example.
Do.
The dead legs in the construction of the hospital, ZBP had them as not exceeding 3 metres.
Yes.
But the SHTMs had them not exceeding 5 metres.
Yes.
And they used the 3 metres on the drawings.
So you didn't. Well, that's a.
It was discussed at interface meeting.
So in this case, the SHTM says 5 metres.
Yeah, the SHTM says 5 metres. Yes.
And ZBP built 3.
Correct.
So you didn't have to do anything. They just built them as 3.
Yeah.
Right. If it had been the other way around, and I know it wasn't, but again, I'm trying to get to a point. Would you have looked at the guidance to see that you needed a different and shorter dead leg? Would you ever look behind the drawings at the guidance?
Only by referring to the SHTMs, which we have done on several occasions throughout the.
Yes, but in one particular case, did it ever become known to you and your colleagues that there was a particular agreement part of the contract called the M&E clarification log, where the air change rate for single rooms was changed? Is that something you came across?
No, I've never come across it.
So what I'm putting to you is that is there not a problem with the process that you and your team at Capita were operating, in that you were checking the construction drawings, but you weren't going behind them to the employer's requirements, to the logs, and to the other documents that would tell you whether the drawings were right?
That's probably correct, because we're relying on the specification of the drawings and relying on the specialist consultants and designers to get the drawings.
Can I show you a document, please, which is called the High Level Information Pack? It's Bundle 17, Document 75, page 2881. Now, when you were...
Just before we get to that, really, it's just to check that I've got the correct note, Mr. Redmond. I think I've understood you as saying that you and your colleague supervisors were relying on the construction drawings.
Yeah.
But did I understand you to qualify that by saying that you would have reference to the SHTMs in addition?
We did that when we reviewed some drawings previously in the contract.
Sorry, you did that?
Yeah, we reviewed design development drawings.
Sorry, when you
reviewed design development drawings.
Right.
I think it was 2012, and we put comments on that to return to the designers.
Why do you...
Right. That sounds to me a separate stage and a separate process.
So if we think about this moment when you're telling us that in 2012, when you reviewed the design development drawings, as opposed to just the construction drawings, why did you do that on that occasion?
Because we were asked, the employer asked us to do that.
The employer asked you to, right?
Yeah.
So we go back to the high-level document, which should be on the screen now, which is Bundle 17 at page 2881. When did you first see this document?
2010.
2010. Have you read it?
Yes, I have.
Right. Is it effectively what Capita agreed to do?
Yes.
Right. Wonder if I can take you to a particular part of it, which is about your duties. It's page 2909. Now, I appreciate that this is a complicated document, and I'm not attempting to define what Capita's contractual liabilities are at any point. But there's a section I'd like to understand. If you go to paragraph 10 at the bottom of this page, we could zoom in. Do you see how, well, let's look at what this says. The supervisor team, which you were leading?
Yes.
Yes. Will fully review and acquaint themselves with all the contract documentation, including all design drawings, schedules, specifications, layouts of 1 to 500, 250, specialist suppliers detailed drawings, and all the information listed in Appendix 3 to allow the supervisor team to deliver to the employer a robust, efficient, and effective service. Did you look at all that material?
Can I take you to the top of the page?
Yes, of course.
Please.
Oh, it's the may be called upon bit.
Yeah, we're never called upon to do
You
it.
weren't called upon,
No.
right? So, in a sense, all these questions I'm asking you about you going behind the construction drawings, did you require to be asked before you would do it?
Well, there was 2 occasions where the employer asked us to review drawings. One was 2011, where they gave us ventilation drawings, and we reviewed those and put comments on them and returned them. Next occasion was 2012, when it was design development drawings, which we reviewed. That was the only 2 occasions.
I mean, I suppose in one sense, there were only 4 of you.
Yeah.
How many people were working, do you think, in the design side of multiplex?
Hundreds.
So you would have to be asked to do this more detailed work?
Yeah.
Right. And you say that has only happened twice?
Yeah.
Let's focus on the first occasion, the ventilation one, 2011.
Yeah.
Can you remember what the ventilation aspect of the project was?
It was the ducting layouts.
Ducting layout?
Yeah, for a plan of the ducting.
And so you presumably your M&E engineer reviewed that?
They did, and they put comments on it and returned them to the employer.
I'm going to show you this this what we're calling the agreed ventilation derogation. That isn't its title at the time. It's in bundle 16, document 23, and I want to go to page 1664. You see at the bottom of this, it's in the form of columns. So you have a heading ventilation. Then on the fourth column, there's a narrative section, which at the bottom entry says water air change to be 6 air changes per hour. Currently shown as 2.5. It's a narrative from left to right, we've been told.
Okay.
Which is not in compliance with SHTM 301. And then in the middle, there's a column that begins Brookfield proposal as outlined. And then there's an agreed, which is on the third column from the right, explaining the basis of acceptance.
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot of these in the M&E log, and we're focused on this one. It's possible that in order to understand the ventilation ducting, you and your colleagues would need to know what the ducting was supposed to achieve in terms of ventilation throughput. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, well, that'd be on the specifications, yeah, in the drawings.
So but if you're checking the drawings, what standard are you checking them against?
Well, the drawings would be approved for construction purposes, and that would be what they would use on site.
Yes, but when Capita were asked to review, we can take this off the screen, were asked to review ventilation ducting.
Yeah.
What were you being asked to do in this review?
The ducting, the plan showed the ducting passing through walls.
Yes.
And in relation to firewalls, because they weren't on the drawings. So we put notes on saying that a fire damper should be on a particular wall because it was a firewall.
Is that all they asked you to look at, fire safety?
That was, yeah.
Nothing else?
Nothing else.
Right, so you were asked a specific question in relation to specific drawings?
Yeah.
Right.
Now, for completeness, what was the other time you were asked to review drawings?
That was 2012 when we were given a bundle of drawings to make comments on, and these were design development drawings.
Sorry.
These were design development drawings that were being prepared for the construction stage.
And what part of the building were they for?
I never saw them because they were M&E drawings.
Right.
Sorry, I missed that.
I didn't see them because they were M&E drawings.
Right, okay.
So if we were to understand your position, it is that all these additional complicated documents you're supposed to review in that part of that high-level document are only when asked.
Correct, and some of the documents that predate Capita's appointment as well. The last one that you displayed probably predates Capita's appointment.
Well, it does. It's from December 2009.
Yeah.
So why would that make a difference?
Well, that would be for design purposes. That document would allow the designer to then progress his design scheme towards completion.
But wouldn't you need to know? I mean, I know you didn't assess this, but in order to assess a piece of design, if asked to do so, wouldn't you need to know everything about that particular part of the building?
Probably, but not in the detail that was on that screen.
Okay. Right. I think what I want to do, my lord, is move on to inspections now. If we go to your statement on page 96, we asked you some practical questions about how you carried out the assessments. So we asked, how often were you on the site? Were any other employees in Capita on site? And you described who they were below. What I wanted first to check is, when you're checking and carrying out inspections, do you check everything or just a sample?
It depends on the construction phase at that time. The Brookfield had package managers which controlled the various different types of construction, one for roofing, one for partitions, one for drainage, etc. And I would go out with the package manager and inspect the work at that particular time within the hospital.
But would you check all the work in the package or just a sample of the work?
At that particular time in the construction phase. So if the roof was, say, 25% in progress, then I would inspect it at that point.
I'm afraid I'm not sure I'm
Okay.
making myself clear, is that if we imagine that in the building there's a fire damper, I mean, you mentioned fire
Yeah.
dampers. By the end of the finish of the building, will you have checked every single fire damper or only a sample?
I probably wouldn't have checked every single fire damper, but I did check above ceilings, particularly in the firewalls where fire dampers were located, to make sure that they were in line with the walls and to make sure that there was adequate fire protection around the fire dampers. Yes.
And so to return to this concept, is your inspection process a sample of the building, i.e. not all of it, or is it every single piece of the building has been checked?
It couldn't be every single piece.
It couldn't be.
It's too large.
Now, I may be talking about a different part of the process, and so please tell me if I am. I wonder if we can go to bundle 33, document 90, page 1848. This is from June 2013. And if we go to item 3 on this agenda, which is actually on page 1851, it's headed Capita Report. Next page, please. And we go to page 1853, in fact. I wonder if we can explore this report from David Hall, below supervisor communications. And DH noted there are large numbers of tests that are repeat tests and Capita are not attending them all. However, how much feedback was Capita receiving for those tests that Capita had not attended? And then AFO advised, as Mr. Follett, I'm assuming, advised that Capita were not witnessing all the tests, and that Brookfield Multiplex Europe were uploading test results to Zootech. However, Capita were not always informed that test results have been uploaded. So what was going on in 2013 about attendance at tests?
2013, both M&E consultants were not on full time on the site, and they were visiting a few times a week.
Right.
So they had limited time on site. So they attended as many tests as they could. What was the other part? Yeah.
And Mr. Follett's raising an issue about transparency. What's the point he's raising?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
Right. So did Capita witness all the tests they were invited to witness?
Yes, they did. Yeah.
So what's this reporting back that they're not?
It must have been earlier on in the contract because in the latter part of the contract, we had a full-time staff member on site witnessing all the tests.
So at this point, there might have been some tests that weren't witnessed.
They may have done tests that when we were not there. Yeah.
Okay. If we can go back to your statement, we're looking at question 38E now, which is on page 110. At the bottom of the page, we asked you what documentation, if any, did Capita produce and provide in respect of validation. Now, you answered, I think possibly more generally, defects were recorded on handheld devices by multiplex managers who, over the page, accompanied Capita during inspections.
Yeah.
So were you not recording the defects yourself?
No, they recorded it as it was a joint exercise. We inspected the particular area that was required to be inspected, and I witnessed them recording the various defects which were identified.
Would you sign on their device or something?
They loaded that information up onto an independent data maintenance system, management system.
No, but would you sign on their device? No. You'd just be there.
Yeah, I was there identifying the defects. They loaded it up onto the system, and it was put on the IDMS system.
And they record that?
And they recorded that. And the IDMS system was used for managing all the defects identified by Brookfield, the NHS, and Capita.
Right. So eventually, how do you know to go back and check that a defect has been fixed if it's recorded on the multiplex system?
Because I had regular meetings with the Brookfield's quality manager, and we interrogated the IDMS, and I did individual inspections of defects to confirm that they were complete. And on occasions, the Brookfield would send photographic evidence that a particular defect was complete.
But you didn't have a record of what defects you'd recorded yourself?
Yes, I did.
Where was that?
On our system.
All right, because the way you described this, we thought you weren't keeping your own record.
No, we issued the defects to Brookfield, and they uploaded that onto the IDMS system, which was a management system, and we retained copies of the defects that we issued, obviously.
Is that a copy derived from the IDMS system?
No, the copies from Capita.
So when you're on site and you find a defect, you've just told me that you would get the manager to record it. Did you record it?
There's two different aspects. If I was going on site and found a defect, I would issue a defect notification under clause 42.2 and copy that to the employer. But doing like area inspections, I would go on to the various floors or area and do a joint inspection with Brookfield, and that was recorded in the IDMS system.
So the defect, once you complete the defect form, you've got a record of those.
Yes.
The ones you find when you're on an inspection with Brookfield Multiplex, have you got a record of those?
They're on the IDMS system, yes.
Which is created by...
Which is managed by, it's a bit like Aconex, it's managed by Brookfield.
And you have access to it?
Through the quality manager, yeah.
Well, no, but do you have access to it?
No.
No. So when I ask the question, do you keep a record of all the defects? The answer is, no, I don't. I have to get it from Multiplex.
Yes, that's correct.
Right. One of the issues which is repeatedly mentioned in your supervisor's reports is open-ended pipework.
Yeah.
I don't particularly want to go through all of them. We don't have a lot of time. I wonder if you could give me your assessment of how serious or not serious the issue of pipework left open was on this particular project.
Yeah, I think due to the scale of the work and the intervals between raising defect notifications for the pipework, it was over a quite a long period of time. So it's not persistent, it's sporadic.
So you see it as a sporadic problem?
Yeah, well, that's at the time, yes, I saw it as sporadic.
So if we see every few months a supervisor report from you that says Brookfield are doing better or Brookfield are doing worse about open pipes, this is a sporadic issue.
Yeah.
What's the risk that is occasioned by leaving pipes open?
Dirt can get into them and cause contamination.
And how would you respond to the evidence of Mr. Pike, who suggested that a lot of the plumbing work was being done off-site and being brought in as pre-assembled units?
It was, yes.
What effect does that have on risk?
It minimises it slightly, but you've still got, if you've got open-ended pipes, then the dust can get in.
In your experience, how many sites have you been a supervisor or inspector on over your career?
About 4.
4?
Not as a supervisor, as an independent tester.
Independent tester.
Yeah.
If you think about those 4, was this similar to the others, or worse or better?
It's similar to other sites, yes.
So we talked momentarily about dead legs, and you explained that ZBP had maximized 3 meters as the length of a dead leg.
Correct.
And the SHTM required 5, in your understanding.
Correct.
Right. I wonder if we can go to a supervisor's meeting from the 7th of September 2012. Now, when 2012, End of 2012. Where is that in the construction process? So
Sorry, say that again,
the
please?
autumn of 2012. What's happening on site then?
It's about a year into the project.
So they're getting to fitting out of pipework.
Inside, yeah.
Right. Let's go to bundle 33, document 83, page 1807. So this is a supervisors meeting, 7th September 2012, and we see that you are present, along with Hugh McDermott, Mr. Moyer, Mr. Seaborn, Mr. Roxburgh, Mr. Follett, Shearna Frew, and Mr. Hall.
Yep.
Now, we can go to the next page. M&E dead legs, bottom of the page. AF, Mr. Follett, I take it, noted that Capita had received a response re dead legs being in excess of 5 meters. AF noted that the guidance advises that dead legs should not be in excess of 5 meters. However, ZBP drawings were specifying that dead legs should not be in excess of 3 meters. BMCL, who's BMCL?
Can you put it back up again?
Please, the top. Previous page, please. One more. No, 1807. Could BMCL be Brookfield Multiplex
Oh, yes.
Limited?
Yeah,
Right, yes. Page 1808, please. Go back to this thing. BMCL had provided an explanation for dead legs in excess of 5 meters, and it was Capita's view that BMCL were pushing the boundaries of what was acceptable. Given your comment about dead legs a moment ago, do you have a recollection of this issue arising?
Absolutely, yes.
So what was going on?
Well, they were having deadlines that were beyond the 3 meter.
So how could they do that if ZBP had designed them for 3 meters?
The contractor had fitted them that way. But in a later meeting, it's mentioned that the employer would accept the 5 meters.
Right. Let's break it down. We'll get to that in a moment. So the drawings would have shown a 3 meter dead leg.
Correct.
Correct. The guidance is 5 meters.
Correct.
And some of them were being built at 5 meters or more.
I don't know if it was more than 5 meters, but more than 3 meters.
More than 3 meters.
Yeah, yeah.
So when it says here, BMCL had provided an explanation for the dead legs in excess of 5 meters, would that mean there were some in excess of 5 meters?
There may well have been, yeah.
Yes. And then Capita's view was then that the BMCL were pushing the boundaries of what was acceptable.
Yeah.
Right. So do we interpret this as at some point in 2012, some dead legs were going in of more than 3 and possibly even more than 5, and at this stage this is being raised by Capita?
And we raise a defect for that.
And you're saying that there's a later meeting when the employer says 5 meters will do?
Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Is this one of the issues where the employer asked you to look behind the construction drawings? Or is it simply you're checking this against the drawings?
We're physically checking that on site.
Against the drawings?
Yeah, yeah.
And so what's happened is someone's built it not in accordance with the
Correct.
drawings? Right. Let's move on to the topic of the pre-filling of the water system. Go off the screen. In fact, the same meeting, in fact. Let's go to bundle 33, same month. Document 83, page 1811. Now, can we just go back? Let me just check one thing. Don't go back anywhere. Yes, it's the same meeting. So this is item 4 on the same meeting. And do you see how there's a section called M&E AF? Bottom half of the page.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, what I'm trying to explore with here, if you have a simple answer, we could then go to the documents. When do you recollect the domestic hot and cold water systems being filled or partly filled with water?
Again, there's a separate interface meeting where that's discussed.
Yes, we'll come back to the moment, but
okay.
just in terms of your broad memory, when do you?
I don't know specifically, but I know that it was discussed at an interface meeting that they were considering filling the pipes with water.
So this is September 12, the one we're looking at.
Yeah.
And I wanted you to help us understand what you think, what we should read is into this. Third bullet point, pressure testing of water systems. Capita waiting a date from Brookfield Multiplex to discuss proposals for pressure testing of water systems. So would pressure testing of water systems involve filling them with water?
Yes.
Right. Capita had subsequently heard that BMCL proposed to fill pipes with water and leave the water in the pipework. And you need to understand what's being proposed. And then David Hall intervenes, had advised in all previous discussions the pipework would not be filled with water, and then there's a discussion. At this point in September 2012, were the pipes filled with water?
I don't know.
What do you take from this about whether they were at this point?
I don't know. I just know that it was discussed at a later date.
Well, let's go and move forward to the next meeting, which is Bundle 33, Document 92, page 1862. This is 8th of August 2013, a year later. So this is a meeting in which you're present. Let's look at the first bullet point of item 4, work in progress. Water for wet system and tank test. Water being used for this purpose was metered, so NHS will be aware of amount being used. For tank testing, a large amount of water will be filled, and if this has had to be fully jettisoned, it will be wasteful. There may be issues with contamination if the systems remain charged or brought into use. Capita will check and issue communication to confirm position with Brookfield. Do you remember this meeting or these events?
I don't.
No. From reading the minute, what can we infer about whether the tanks had been filled by this point?
I think they were filled at that point.
Is that just based on reading the document?
Yeah.
Right. What might be the discussion about contamination and Capita checking? What was the checking that Capita asked to do?
None in that case.
Well, it says there, Capita will check. So
Check if they're filling the pipes with water. Yes.
that's what you think it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go to a construction progress meeting on the 4th of August 2014. That's Bundle 43, Volume 3, Document 44, page 1524. So this is a meeting in which you're present.
Yep.
And if we go to page 1529, to item 4, do we see commissioning activities are progressing well? Can you commission a plant room without water in the pipes?
I wouldn't think so.
Right.
Sorry, what was that answer?
So I wouldn't think so.
Do you see at the bottom of this page, there's a reference to David Hall asking questions about corrosion and infection control issues. Do you have any memory of those being
No,
issues raised?
I don't. I have a memory of another meeting where the project manager accepted that the pipes should be filled with water.
Well, do you have the date of that meeting? You're going to have to look at your notes.
Can I?
Well, before you do that, are you looking at a record of the meeting?
No.
No, what are you looking at?
Notes. But
And where did you get the notes from?
There is a bundle within the bundles. There's a reference to a interface meeting where.
Well, if you could tell me which bundle it is, we'll go to it. So look at your.
Well,
what do your notes say?
I don't know. Can I look?
This bit of the note, yes, of course.
Bundle 33, page 1855.
Let's go to 1855. Right. So this is the 5th of July 2013. You think this might have an answer?
Yep.
What page should we be looking at?
I think it's near the bottom.
Well, let's next page. Here we are. Go back. So testing of water systems, item 3. Third paragraph. Is this where we should be going?
Is there another page below that?
Next page. That's the link bridge. I'm not sure. It'll go to the end of this page. Next one.
Yep.
Next one.
Yep.
Next one. Next one. Let's go back to that first page of the document. So when did you read this document? Next page, sorry. When did you read this document? Last week?
2 days ago. Yeah.
And what are you looking for?
I'm looking for a discussion about the pipes.
Well, do you see, however, how in the first item is called testing of water system and ENMS and void detection? What is ENMS?
Sorry, where is that?
Top left-hand corner,
right.
matters arising.
I don't know.
You don't know? Okay. If we look at the third paragraph, do you see how it goes? DH noted that in relation to testing of water systems, the NHS team needed to understand the principles of what Brookfield will be doing to charge systems. AFO, that's Mr. Follett, your colleague, advised that Brookfield will be carrying out air tests in the first instance and then fill with water and retardant for testing.
Correct.
And this retardant will be left. What's the retardant are we talking about here?
It's a chemical retardant.
To do what?
I'm not sure.
And is this the domestic hot and cold water system we're talking about here?
I'm not sure.
Right. PM noted that leaving the water in the pipe was preferable to emptying the pipework after testing and leaving empty.
Yeah, that's the point I was making.
Right. So you think that's Mr. Moyer agreeing to the water system being filled?
Yeah.
Right.
And the water left in it rather than emptying it.
Were you and your colleagues involved in any way checking that the water in the system remained wholesome or after that date?
No.
No. Right. We can turn it off the screen. Can we go to the Capita witness statement? So that is volume 3 of the witness statements. And the Capita statement is at page 498. And I want to go to paragraph 57, which is page 514. Paragraph 58. Were you involved in writing the Capita witness statement?
No.
No. Could you just read paragraph 58? So Capita's project supervisor team were aware of the system being filled from August 2013.
Yep.
Would you agree or disagree with that assessment?
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Now, if you take it off the screen, let's just check here. It's been suggested that after that, there was testing that then ran on that was carried out by contractors for multiplex. Would you know anything about that?
Was that after the handover?
After the water was filled?
No.
No. That there was a system whereby members of staff appointed by Mercury would go around and flush sinks, showers, toilets in order to clear the water.
Yeah, that's a normal process.
Also, that's something you were aware of?
Well, I knew they were doing it. It's a normal process.
Yeah. And then there was water testing carried out in December 2014.
Yep.
Which were carried out by H&V. Is that something you're aware of?
There is reference to it.
But were you aware of it?
I can't remember. But
you can't remember?
No.
Right, I'll move on from water testing. We had some evidence from Mr. Parry. Do you remember Mr. Parry?
Yeah.
Right. Mr. Parry, who was the estates manager, gave evidence at the inquiry in the week commencing the 19th of August last year. This is just for my colleagues.
Yeah.
Page 220 of the statement bundle for him. He said that he found, after the hospital opened, repeated block drainage risers causing sewage discharge into wards. The blockages were not evident until after migration, when the system was challenged by routine activity. The cause of these blockage was found to be deliberate sabotage by multiplex contractor staff who had their contracts terminated. Is this something you were ever aware of?
No.
No. Well, I won't ask you about it further then. Let's move on to the question of handover. You mentioned at the beginning of evidence the idea of balancing ventilation systems.
Yep.
What work was Capita doing around balancing ventilation systems?
Capita didn't do any work in relation to the balance.
What checking was you doing
The
there?
The checking, the specialist contractor, commissioning contractor, balances, commissions and balances the ventilation system, and then issues a certificate to confirm that it was successful and compliant.
And what role does Capita have in that process?
To view that certificate.
You don't check the work?
No, we don't do that.
You just check there is a certificate?
Yeah.
In what way is that similar or different to the concept of validation of a ventilation system?
It's similar to validation. At the end of the contract, around about January, I checked all the certification that Brookfield were gathering for the employer. They had a hard copy file which they were filling with the various certificates, building control.
So they carried out a process that produced these hard copies?
And I carried out a quality audit of it.
What's the difference between commissioning and validation of a ventilation system?
I don't know.
When you do these tests that they're talking about, do you check, for example, that the pressure gradient is in the direction that the designer intends?
I'm not qualified.
You're just checking the certificates there.
I'm just my colleague witnessed all the tests
Right.
that were being performed in the mechanical and electrical side, and witnessed those, recorded them in our reports, and either recorded them as a pass or a fail. And if it was a fail, then they would retest and re-witness.
Right. I'm going to just double check something in your statement, if you allow me a moment. So if we can go to your statement, which is question 38C, it's on page 110 of your statement bundle. Now, we referred you to a document, which I'm going to come to in a moment, which we said in the question that Capita were expected to check and validate every room. And you said checking and validating of rooms was carried out using room data sheets, providing multiplex with elevation drawings of the room, providing very detailed requirements of the individual rooms in the hospital. Inspections were carried out by the multiplex manager responsible for that area, and any defects found by Capita recorded and managed on the integrated database management. So this, you see checking and validating as the same thing?
Yeah.
Right. Allow me one moment just to look at that document before we... sorry, I must find the right page. Yes, so this is a completion criteria action note from the 2nd December 2014. So that's bundle 43, volume 5, document 126, page 992. So this appears to be, what is a completion, is this a completion criteria meeting? And what was that?
I wasn't at it.
You weren't at it?
No, I wasn't invited.
Because one of the things that we have in this document is but we'll take that off the screen. Yeah, sorry. Then we go back to page 993. This is a meeting you weren't at. The next page. Do you see how there's a sentence, third line down, begins DL, Mr. Loudon, advised that he understood the position that the project is currently at. However, it's imperative that Capita had an opportunity to check and validate every room.
Yep.
AF, who is Mr. Fernie,
Yep.
noted that even though Capita were carrying out validation and quality checks, it was expected on 26th January 15 there will be minor issues, latent defects. Now, we've had evidence in the inquiry that validation is a particular process by which someone independent of the commissioner checks a ventilation system against the relevant guidance, not against the drawings, works out what the system will do in terms of pressure, air change, these sort of things. Is that your understanding of validation?
No.
No. So if they thought you were doing validation, you were just doing checking.
Correct.
And that took the form of your colleague witnessing
tests.
the commissioning.
Yep.
Now, if we can take that off the screen, there's a document that postdates your involvement, but in the absence of anybody else in Capita, I'm going to show it to you and ask you to see if you can help me out. So this is the final defect certificate, and it's from 26th of January 2017, by which point you've retired.
Yep.
Yes. Bundle 12, document 13, page 848. And perhaps I'll explain the reason I'm showing it to you. The earlier document, which you are involved in, happens in January 2015.
Yep.
When the entire project team are still there and are available to you, you would presumably would have discussed the completion certificate with them.
Yes.
Yes. Your colleague who completes this form, if we go to page 885, no, we don't. Go back to page 848. Go to the next page. Next page. One after that. Obviously written the number down wrong, so I think it's 855. Yes. Can you assist us about whether anything remarkable about this or whether you consider this to be normal? If we just zoom in the top of the page and it has supervisors meeting with estates. Is it in any way unusual or remarkable that the people with whom your colleagues who completed this were meeting were no longer the project team, but were now an estates team?
Yes, it's not unusual.
Not unusual at all?
No.
So the concern I have to put to you is this. Remember how we looked at that M&E clarification log about the air change rates?
Yeah.
And I remember how I asked you questions about isolation rooms and teenage cancer trust rooms and the air rate in those. It seems to be the case that none of these people knew anything about that. How can Capita produce a final certificate when it's not being given all the information about the heart of the contract in ventilation terms?
They would issue the final certificate based on the information they had.
Right. Take that off the screen, please. Were you still working on the project in April 2015?
Yes.
And one of the documents I put into your document list was the DMA Canyon L8 risk assessment from April 2015, which is bundle 6, document 29, page 122. Can we try that again? Let's go back to the start of that bundle. We'll get my computer to warm up. Do you remember did you look at the document? Well, it'll come on the screen in a moment. Did you look at the DMA Canyon report when we gave it to you on the document list?
Yes.
Yes. So that is page 1472. It's the wrong year. It's the wrong hearing. You're looking at the 20. That's an Edinburgh bundle. If we can look at the Glasgow bundle 6, we will get a lot further. Page 122. Right. This is the document I put on the document list. Had you seen this document before?
No.
No.
It was not shared.
You didn't see this in the summer of 2015?
No.
Did you have an opportunity to read it?
I haven't, no.
Yeah. Lord, at the moment, I think that's probably all the questions I have for this witness. I might just speak to a colleague briefly to there's one other issue, but it may be this is the right moment to see if any of our colleagues in the room have questions.
Right. Well, we'll take a break now for that purpose. Mr. Redmond, what we need to do now is check if any of the other legal representatives have further questions. So can I ask you to return to the witness room?
Yep.
And it might take 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
It's not like you.
Mr. McIntosh?
We just have one question, my lord.
One more question, I understand,
Okay, thank
Mr.
you.
Redmond.
So, Mr. Redmond, we had some evidence earlier in the week from, last week, in fact, from Mr. Pike, who was the M&E manager for Multiplex. Do you remember Mr. Pike?
Yes, I do.
His evidence was that Capita, which it may not have been you, it may have been one of your colleagues, had in fact signed off, was his words, the isolation rooms.
No,
Is there any process that he might be getting confused about you could think of?
I would think so. Yeah.
Is there any way, what would Capita's interactions have been in respect of the isolation rooms as supervisors?
Yeah, again, on my list, I've got a breakdown of a timeline that I was involved in the isolation rooms,
And where did you find that from?
from a mixture of bundles and additional information that I reviewed
And where did the additional information come from?
from Capita.
From Capita. What sort of documents are you talking about here?
It's not documents, it's just, it refers to documents to my reports at that time, and
So you're looking at your supervisor report?
yeah, and that identifies the process from July right through till September.
Well, if you could get that note out, please, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Is it back there through there?
Yes.
Oh, right. Sorry. Look, in fact, in the witness's absence, what I thought I'd do is simply get him to read out what he's noted, and then we'll ask him to produce the documents that it's based on. So what I'm going to ask you to do, Mr. Redmond, is if you go to that note,
Okay.
have you recorded when you did work around the isolation room?
Yes.
When did that start?
Well, it starts. Hold on a second. It starts in July
Of which year?
2015.
After handover?
Yeah.
Right, so you didn't have any involvement with isolations before then?
Not personally. It was the modification work and isolation.
Oh, right, well, that's a different piece of
Oh, is it?
evidence.
Okay.
So if you had work involved, it was afterwards?
Yeah.
Right. Just in broad terms, what were you doing in the summer of 2015 around isolation rooms?
I only got involved in the modifications.
What were these modifications?
They changed the airflow, I think, and they changed the ceilings.
So they sealed the ceilings?
Yeah.
And what way did they change the airflow?
I don't know the detail of the design. I know that the project manager issued a PMI to modify the isolation rooms and discussed that with Brookfield and the designers.
And then they carried it out?
Yeah, they carried it out.
And did you do the checks after it was done?
I was involved in the building side of it and was there with NHS and Brookfield when they did their final walkthrough.
Right.
And Brookfield provided the test certificate to the NHS.
Right, but you didn't have any involvement with isolation rooms before January 2015?
Not as far as ventilation is concerned, no.
No. Would any of your colleagues have had involvement in the ventilation before January?
Probably.
Probably.
Yes.
Okay. I think that's probably all I can really explore with that one.
Well, Mr. Redmond, that is now the end of your evidence and you're free to go. But before you do go, can I say thank you for your attendance this afternoon, but also for the obviously hard work that you have put into preparing to give that evidence.
Thank you.
So thank you for that as well, but you're now free to go.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
I understand we resume with Mr. Connell and Mr. Seaborn.
Mr. Seaborn, it should be worth also mentioning that on Friday we start early at 9 o'clock. We have Mr. O'Donovan. His statement has now been produced and it's been added to an updated version of volume 3 of the statements. So it may be that anyone who's interested in reading a statement needs to download a fresh version of the statement bundle.
Right. Well, I look forward to see you tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Thank you.